briefly introduce the concept since we're going to be talking about it. Fair use basically allows people to make uses of other people's copyrighted works, without running afoul of the law. Probably the classic example is to quote from a book in a book review. If you write a book review, you can quote from the book in talking about that book, and even though you're quoting and taking from a copyrighted work, it is considered to be fair use. So you will not be liable for copyright infringement. I've also been a long-time music fan, and so when I was going through this class, I wondered to myself, why is it that sampling in music seems to have been treated differently? Why is that not fair use? Is it perhaps fair use and it just hasn't come up enough in the courts for them to have decided it, et cetera? And it's so it's an issue I've sort of been interested in a while, and especially now that I teach property law, have been interested in again. And recently, with the release of Girl Talk's album Feed the Animals, which, a mashup album that samples hundreds of songs and for which he did not clear the copyrights for the stuff he sampled, that sort of led the issue, I think, to get renewed interest in the media.
This is an affirmative defense to copyright infringement. So once you decide to use something without permission, it's you're going to bring up fair use if you're being sued, right? Okay. So it's an affirmative defense to infringement. So once you make that decision to use it as a fair use, you're actually deciding to infringe. But that's okay, because sometimes it's a fair use.
I'm not going to address the Girl Talk situation specifically, because I think it is greater than that we're talking about fair use, sampling, when is it not appropriate to use other people's work without authorization, and to what extent. I am not a absolutist about this. I do not believe that you should be able to take everybody's work and just use it to your own purposes. Puffy has to pay. When he takes old school songs and just flips it, the track, and has somebody rhyme over it, he has to pay. On the other hand, we do have many transformative works to the extent that you do use people's work in a way or form that they had never intended, had never made any expectation to make a profit for. And the example I use most often is the Andy Warhol projects, using a Coke can, a Campbell soup can. All of those things are copyrighted items. However, we would never think to sue Andy Warhol. That's, of course, a fair use.
DJing inherently is you're playing other people's records, right? But as a producer, I've worked with people like Yoko Ono. I work with the guys from the Police, like Stuart Copeland. He's one of my favorite drummers. I work between like live music and between sampling. I've never been sued, and above all, when I was putting together my book, I'll just call it up really quick, Sound Unbound. I ended up tracking down the guy who invented the record cover sleeve. He's still alive. He's like 100+ years old. And so one of the things that I realized when we did an interview with him about the revolution in graphic design that record cover sleeves ushered in. If you really think about how the record cover sleeve, if you try this experiment, if you go to Waterloo, it's a great record store. It's my mecca when I'm in Austin. You go in there and just try and like visualize what the sound is. Like just go through any records section and just, it's like a Rorschach blot test. Now, every song, every story has a relationship to narrative, right? People are trying to tell a story. If you try and tell a story with other people's words, you could either be Ovid, a great renowned Greek philosopher and poet, or you could be sued. It's one of those funny things where, depending on who traces the sources, everybody's copying in one way or another as you build your vocabulary. And I've tended to find over the years, copyright law, as it now stands in the U.S., is at a real crisis. And I think that we're looking at the way the web has reached out and transformed people's creative processes. Your audio palette, your visual palette, your vocabulary. We're living in a huge ocean of references every day. I didn't ask to see Mickey Mouse. I didn't ask to hear, the Beatles, whatever. But it's some part of my vocabulary. If you grow up with that and that media cloud around you is your way of sort of processing culture, nobody can reach into your memory and exercise an eraser, and erase it. You're going to use material around you. So I've tended to find DJing, for me at least, music isn't music. Music is information. And the way that people create culture means that you have to have rich and robust forms of exchange to make the culture better.
it's about sampling. It's about the history of it, some of the major law cases, and then it kind of ends that we're in a remix culture and that the law has not caught up to that culture. The really interesting thing about working on that film is that without fair use, it couldn't exist. And that's not to say that we didn't license in traditional methods. You know, we had a fairly substantial budget from PBS and played on PBS, but if we were to license everything traditionally, it would cost over $4 million because the material we're talking about Disney, we're talking about the Beatles, we're talking about Led Zeppelin, etc. And there would have been no way to do it without fair use. And that's not to say that it made it any easier, but it made it possible. We had a section in Copyright Criminals about funk, and it's about George Clinton, and we were able to license the performance rights of the video of We've Got the Funk. And when it came to license the music track itself, Rights Workshop, you know, the organization that was doing our clearing for us, reputable company, contacted Bridgeport Music on 3 occasions, and they denied us. And when we called back, they just hung up the phone on us and denied without reason. And so we were at the point of, well, what do we do?
And George Clinton was like, yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, so we, George Clinton didn't care at all, and no one cared besides Bridgeport, and we were faced with, do we claim fair use and say we tried, we attempted, etc., but at the risk of finding ourselves in court over something that might not matter that much. So what we did instead was we contacted George Clinton directly and said, what do you have full rights to? And he had like 12 songs to choose from, so I was like, we kind of fudged it, and it was better than going to court. That one was not worth the fight, but it was unfortunate and it was strange that